We're going to call this meeting to order. If you'll all rise, please. Supervisor Brotherton.
Oh, Heavenly Father, we come before you with thanksgiving hearts, thankful for the opportunity to serve you in the capacity of representing this great county and this great state, and representing the people here that we serve. And we ask that you give us the wisdom and the ability and the knowledge and the direction to represent those in the very best manner that we can. And we ask all of these things in the name of the mighty God. Amen.
Amen.
Supervisor Watson.
You'll follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, right now I need a motion to call for an executive session to be held on March 3rd, 2014 at 9 a.m. for discussion and consultation with legal counsel in accordance with ARS 38-431-.03.
So made.
I'll second the motion.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Do we have any committee or legislative reports? Supervisor Johnson.
Madam Chair, we had a meeting with Bill Becker. He's Executive Director of the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, and spoke to this month's Energy, Environment, Land Use Steering Committee. He spoke about air quality issues as they relate to the EPA. He doesn't see any major legislation being passed regarding air quality in the next couple of years, but he does see a lot of regulatory issues being passed. One concern he raised was the EPA's intent to regulate existing power plants through President Obama's Climate Action Initiative. The EPA has to place these regulations on new power plants, but if they succeed, they can regulate existing power plants as well, which may eventually get rid of coal power in this country. Another regulation he mentioned we may want to be prepared for is the ozone standard, which is where you want to implement regulations that are lower than the current 75 parts per billion of carbon monoxide in our ozone. EPA is looking to finalize the fuel vehicle standard to a Tier 3 to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions. This move would possibly raise gas by a penny, according to Mr. Becker. Emerging trends and threats. The Center for Internal Security put on a webinar to go over the newest trends and threats regarding cybersecurity for 2014. Kevin Haley, who is the Director and Product Manager of Simtech Security Response, spoke to us about the new Internet of Things concept in which household devices like refrigerators and coffee machines are now being equipped with Wi-Fi technology. He mentioned this new technology comes with a great deal of cybersecurity concerns. An example he gave was a Wi-Fi enabled baby monitor that was hacked. The hacker came over the monitor and started talking explicit things to a Texas couple's 2-year-old daughter. He said with the Internet of Things, many are going to start seeing appliances and devices become hackable. Next, he talked about how businesses are becoming more susceptible to hackers and that the way hackers are getting access to data has become more sophisticated. He noted that attacks on small businesses have gone up 300% in the last year, and that businesses with less than 250 employees saw an increase in attacks by 31%. In the early Internet days, hackers would attack computers by setting up fake antivirus software, but now a day they do not want is known as ransom attacks, where basically they take over your computer for ransom, costing users anywhere from $300 to thousands of dollars to gain access back to it again. Lastly, he spoke briefly about the vulnerability on mobile devices by stating that in 2013 alone, 7,612 new malware variants were created for Android devices. He said it's important to not just have antivirus on your computer, but to also have it on your cell phones. Representative Ann Kirkpatrick held a conference call this month to update us on issues being heard right now in Congress. She mentioned that the pill-approved counties will see a 1-year extension equaling roughly $410 million. She mentioned during the call a concern she had regarding the Mexican gray wolf. She listed many concerns about the wolf traveling north out of its designated area due to the recent drought. The drought has forced it to travel to other areas to find food, resulting in the wolf getting closer to homes and neighborhoods. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Johnson. Do we have any other reports? Okay, how about a county administrator's report?
I have no report today, Madam Chairman.
Okay. We move on. Motion to approve the minutes of the December 2nd and December 16th, 2013 Board of Supervisor meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, now we have our call to public. Those wishing to address the board at the call to public regarding matters not on the board agenda must fill out and submit to the clerk a call to the public request to speak form located in the back. I don't have anybody signed up right now. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for our call to public? Okay, seeing none, I will close the call to public. Now we have our consent agenda. The consent agenda, items 5 to 28, will be considered as a group and acted upon by one motion minus any items pulled for discussion. Do we have any items?
I have no items.
Any items? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving along, we have no public hearings, so we will go to the regular agenda. Item number 29, discussion and possible action regarding at our November 18, 2013 meeting, the board approved an updated letter of agreement for legal representation by Jennings, Strauss, and Salmon, PLC, regarding the Planet Ranch sever and transfer applications. As the firm's first task, Mohave County asked for a report on the status of the applications before the Arizona Department of Water Resources and Mohave County Strategic Alternatives. The report is available for the board's consideration, and it includes options for consideration and a recommendation to retain an expert in the field.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the hiring of Attorney Carlos Ronstadt with a cap not to exceed $25,000, with the scope of work to be set by the administration.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next up, 30A, discussion and possible action, reconsideration of item 12 from the November 4th, 2013 board meeting, adopting Board of Supervisor Resolution number 2013-151, denying an extension of time for a rezone of assessors parcels numbers 254-31-008C to 009F to 009G, 254-33-004A-005B, and 011C from an AR 10A agricultural residential 10-acre minimum lot size zone to a C-2H/10A general commercial highway frontage 10-acre minimum lot size zone to allow for future commercial uses in the Silverado vicinity, both sides of U.S. Highway 93 between Hidden Valley Drive and Hackberry Road, Mohave County, Arizona. Okay, we have several people signed up to speak to this, and we have an A and a B. But I have them all as a group. So first, we'll start with Mr. Mark McNeary. If you'll come down and give your address, please, for the record.
Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry. The professional folks back here on the projector have an opportunity to put a map up of the area if you'd like to have.
Sure,
have it.
yes, absolutely. You put we have a map of this area. There it is. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, Bill, don't we need to reconsider this first?
Yes, you do. That's first.
Oh, okay. So,
Motion for reconsideration.
oh, I'm sorry.
Second.
Okay, then we have a motion to reconsider in the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, thank you.
My name is Mark McNeary, live on the Purple Rose Ranch, Purple Rose Lane in Kingman, Arizona, at the Windmill Ranch locations. And Madam Chairman and the Board of Supervisors, I thank you for giving us a few moments to express concerns. I am definitely not for this rezoning issue. Three things, and I'll be very quick within my 3 minutes. First of all, when all of us invested in property and built our homes or ranches in that area, we were promised the lack of artificial light, noise, traffic congestion. Everybody on the windmill ranches had to purchase 40 acres, and there would be no concern of water problems or lack of water, and a quiet home for all of our animals, horses and so forth. And the lack of that would certainly impact our home and property values, which we all invested in. Number two, the Silverado issue. My wife Julie and I took a ride through there the other day where we have 14 red-tagged, non-completed homes. The first 7 are close to the road, and it really looks like a modern-day ghost town. And the condition of them is very dangerous. There's obviously been children playing around them and breaking windows and so forth, but they're not structurally strong enough that would withstand, a possible accident. The ones on the back were more completed, but still red-tagged and open for invasion by vermin or people. And it certainly devalues our home properties because the Windmill Ranch property, we're the northernmost ranch on that property, is only 1.5 miles away. So that's a big concern. The other thing is that I don't know the gentleman personally who's trying to alter the zoning code, but reputation is something that's very important. And when you look at these 14 homes, and I guess they had specs, people that spec the houses and stuff, I'm sure they lost a lot of money. And, all of the issues seem to be a little clouded with detail. And it's certainly, with a heavy manufacturing influx in that area, a lot of the things that we were promised would disappear, and our home values certainly would not appreciate. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McNary.
I have a question for Mr. McNary.
Yes.
Mr. McNary, about how far do you live from Silica Drive?
Silica Drive? I'm not sure where that is.
How far do you live from Caliuma?
I'm not quite sure where that is.
How far do you live from South Hackberry Road, where it goes over to Highway 93?
1.5 miles.
So you're a mile and a half south of
Right.
of that? Okay.
And that's where the Windmill Ranch property starts.
Right. And just for clarification, the buildings that were on the homes that were built in that area, I believe, are on the parcel that was reviewed a number of years ago for the solar project.
That's correct.
And the parcel we're talking about today is the commercial project. So they're 2 separate functions that we're looking at here.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the dilapidated homes were on the solar project that will be coming up again in November for reconsideration. And believe me, they continue to be an eyesore for me, so I can certainly appreciate your viewpoint.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McNary.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Mr. Wayne Smith?
Chairman Angus, members of the board, my name is Wayne Smith. My address is 2752 South Gallimarco Way, Kingman 86401. I'm against this reconsideration of item 12, an extension of time from the November 4th, 2013 BOS meeting. And the nightmare continues for Mohave County and its residents. We all want progress. So what is progress? By definition, it means advance, growth, development, and improvement. My idea of progress would be being good stewards of the land, bring in businesses that for the most part enhance the lives and property values of the existing neighborhood, follow rules and laws and what the area is zoned for to the fullest extent. Unfortunately, the investment group that is requesting the extension today, their idea of progress is building a dozen or so houses, let them sit until they become dilapidated, creating a safety hazard, and they have refused to tear them down. Another idea of progress on their part was to build a solar plant using outdated technology that would have consumed massive amounts of fresh water every minute, quite possibly eliminating our water supply and killing an aquifer. Both of these items, for no better term, are in your face, meaning they don't care what we or the county thinks. And now they want an extension of time for a rezone, which they have done nothing for the last 10 years. There is a pattern forming here, and in my opinion, it is not a good one. With all of this in mind, I would like for this board, the elected officials of Mohave County, to take charge of this situation today. Vote to deny this reconsideration. Let them clean up the mess, eyesore, and safety hazard that they've already created, and let them use their own money to do so before you approve anything else from this group. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Remington Bishop.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I go by Gene Bishop. My address is 251 North Friendship Pass, Kingman, Arizona, 86401. I am against both the reconsideration and the adoption of the resolution, so both 30A and 30B. Supervisor Johnson's assertion at the regular meeting on November 4th in 2013 that in 10 years they still haven't completed any original or modified projects which required adjustments and changes to zoning in the past is still true. Manager Ballard stated that in 10 years they have not developed the parcel for any purposes for which it was rezoned. Chairman Watson's motion is still valid. I quote, "It had been 10 years since the original plan had been proposed. Certainly there should have been a number of changes since then, and it should have been readdressed. No evidence appears on the county website or any other public access venue to indicate that the plan has been updated, to indicate that the changes already completed on US 93, which have occurred or are planned to ensure the county would not be liable for approving any other modifications or plan would have to be abrogated by known changes that are already proposed." Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Patty Walrod.
Madam Chairperson, Supervisors. My name is Patty Walrod. I live at 5661 South Mountain Lion Road in Kingman at Windmill Ranch off of Highway 93, approximately mile marker 98. I spoke last November in opposition to Mr. Horner's request for extension of time for rezone. At that time, I shared with you that Mr. Horner and his team have never reached out to the neighbors and adjacent stakeholders of this property. Instead, they've tried to fly under the radar and hope that none of us will risk life or limb to read the posted notices as traffic hurtles by at 70 miles an hour on Highway 93. The zone changes that Mr. Horner has asked for are inconsistent with Mohave County's own land use guidelines for suburban development areas, including Silverado Estates. It says neighborhood commercial uses will be permitted at appropriate locations where they are compatible with adjacent uses and infrastructure. This does not, I repeat, not include C2H zoning. As a landscape architect, I know that when you have a project that you believe in, but others are concerned will impact your neighbors, then the best course of action is to reach out to the stakeholders to demonstrate to them that there will be substantial benefits from the project and that the project is for the general good. Get them on board. Mr. Horner and his team have still not attempted to contact any of us. one must then assume that there is no viable plan to present and he's simply practicing entitlement zoning, or that the project has no greater good. Mr. Horner and his team have made many, many promises, promises that were impossible to keep, promises that were never meant to be kept. The only greater good that exists is for Mr. Horner and his team's bank accounts, not for the residents of Mohave County. I told you last November that those of us who live out here consider ourselves stewards of the land. East Coast and West Coast politicians refer to the middle of the country as flyover country. Sadly, too many city folks look at rural areas with the same disdain, some place to drive through to get to the next exciting city. But the open desert is not synonymous with a wasteland. It is a rich tapestry of cultures and stories, the Wallapai, the miners, the cattlemen who continue to work the land, and the hunters who live off the land. I urge you today to stand behind your decision of last November to protect this unique piece of Mohave County and all of the stories it has to tell, from unscrupulous developers seeking to pad their own bank accounts at the expense of the residents of Mohave County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jim Carter.
Madam Chairperson and members of the board, my name is Jim Carter and my address is 11839 East Blake Ranch Road. Regarding the reconsideration of time from the previous denial and the extension of time for the rezone, items number 2013-151 and 151A. I am against both of these items. Most of the reasons have already been stated. Mainly, during the time that has been pending, nothing has been done in this area to improve the area. The buildings there have deteriorated. The land is not being used as intended, and that any change to a commercial rezone would only deteriorate the living conditions and for those people living in and near the area. Therefore, I'm against both of these.
Thank you very much. Joanne Carter, Coster. Coster?
Madam Chair and members of the board, my name is Joan Coster, and I live at 11400 East Deer Crossing Road, Kingman, Arizona 86401. I'm against the reconsideration adoption of the rezone resolution number 2013-151 and 151A, which are currently slated as Agenda 30A and 30B for the February 18th meeting today. The facts derived and stipulated by Chairman Watson at the regular meeting of November 4th, 2013, which deserve the wise decision to disapprove further extension, are still true. Now adding one clarification to Manager Ballard's statement, which is more troubling. And this has been mentioned, but I'm going to mention it again if you don't mind. There are 13 incomplete and deteriorating houses situated on the west side of US 93 between Hackberry Road and Hidden Valley, which are within the boundaries identified in this petition. All of these incomplete houses are in various stages of deterioration and should be evaluated to determine if they present possible fire risk, safety issues from falling materials, dangers from storm-driven flying debris, or health concerns from vermin contamination, supporting the board decision and intention to require compliance with their earlier decisions, directives to remove the buildings. The local residents should not be subjected to potential damages from the additional safety risks from those abandoned dwellings, especially since no fire rescue district has been assigned responsibility for this region. The introduction of additional construction activity with no fire protection plan in place increases local residents' exposure to higher fire risk. I am against both A and B. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Carl Evans?
I'm just against both A and B.
Okay, thank you. Ken Lindsay?
Good morning. My name is Ken Lindsay. I live at 11400 East Deer Crossing Road, Unit B. I'm in opposition to the extension of time on this matter. I don't have a Great Dane dog in this fight, but I think I do have a little Chihuahua, and so I'd like to address that from that standpoint. I'm a recent move into this area from California, and I don't know all of the rules. However, in the posting of this, with the northern boundary of this project being Hidden Valley Road, and the southern end of that being that of Hackberry Road, it's interesting to me and raises concern that there's no posting at all at Hackberry Road, which is like the main and primary entrance into the project. There's a total of 3 signs that I was able to find as I searched the area yesterday. So traffic traveling at 65 miles, 70 miles an hour, and sometimes 55 miles an hour on that highway is there's no time to read that. You can't read anything. You don't even have a second of time to read a 4-inch letter on a poster. The only way you can do that is pull off the road, which was a little bit dangerous, which I did. One sign was 50 feet off the road, north of Brownstone, about a half mile. And there's absolutely no way to see that other than I just saw something white and I was looking for something white. So there's a question of adequate notice of this meeting today for the extension. And I would enter my objection to the extension of time simply because they've had adequate time to do all that they were required to do and didn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Lutensky?
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Lutensky. I live at 11290 East Sand River Ranch Road, Kingman, Arizona, 86401. The last time I was here, I had said I believed in preventive medicine and zoning. Again, my neighbors and I would ask you to practice preventive zoning. By this I mean, what is the track record of the people applying? Do we need more strip malls with parking lots that look like gravel pits, half-built buildings and homes, foundations formed but not poured, empty lots, dirt streets, dusting homes and businesses miles away? We believe that the board has a duty to protect all concerned, especially those that it affects the most. Lights, noise, traffic, air, and the environment. I went to bed in an area zoned agricultural residential. I woke up the next day with a zone MX heavy industry next to me. I ask you now, are we extending in zoning so it can be shopped around to the highest bidder? Are we allowing the dollar to make the decisions? We are not against progress. I would ask you to think about the person, the families, that wakes up next to a battery melting plant, truck stop, steel mill, or power plant, with no place to go because all they have is where they are. They go to the well and find the water table has dropped 200 feet. Will these families, these people, will they call this progress? We know that commercial land is worth more. We also know that the residents pay for it by all number of things. If there is a problem in the area, the residents' and land values go down. You say they may go up. But the but is also the problem. How close to the bad zone before it helps you? And do you move? Was it worth it? Was it worth the bucks? Taxes, revenues, what are the costs? Again, I say we are not against progress. We believe that the known and possible problems should be seriously looked into. Who in the end will pay those costs, one way or the other? I think that we know who's going to take the hit on this. I have neighbors who really love the night sky. There are times when I feel I'm living next to owls. I have another who is elderly and built his own very large observatory. What are we willing to do to an area for what reasons? When I spoke to a representative of the MX zoning request that happened, she said that they were going to put up a 150-foot lighted tower. I asked, how can you do this in a 30-foot height limit zone? She said, I'll just tell the board. I ask you, how are the residents supposed to deal with this kind of power and arrogance? What are we to do? Any and all problems will fall on all the residents. Be they close or far from the zone that's being messed with. These decisions made by the board affect our lives. I thank you for listening and your consideration and possible help. But I would really like you to understand these decisions affect our lives and our homes and our places where we plan to retire and die at, not to be messed with.
Thank you, Mr. Lutensky. Okay, and we do have somebody speaking on behalf of the developer, Silver Ranch Corporation, Mr. Richard Basinger. Is Richard here?
Good morning. And with regards to this area, the Horners acquired large parcels of land and have developed that land over time. We maintain, increase that land, and develop that land. Has worked with the state that foresees that Interstate 11, certainly 93, as the NAFTA highway runs through it, and Interstate 11, the probable, we hope, absolute Highway 11 interstate. For people to suggest that they are looking for a rural lifestyle and don't want commercial development along an interstate with interchanges that have been interchanged land that has been purchased, it's Section 5, which this commercial development would be located in, and Section 21, which I understand is further to the south. The fact is that is not realistic. The fact is that the Horners were part of developing an area plan. That was expensive. There's been a lot of expenses. Millions of dollars have gone into this development. The area plan was adopted unanimously. We talk about what has happened. Who could have predicted, first of all, the runaway prices and inflation of land and development costs that occurred prior to approximately 2008, and 2008, where there was a downturn that absolutely left places far more developed than out in this area, completely empty, undeveloped, including North Las Vegas and areas in Kingman and otherwise. Homes being repossessed. We have the fact that this would prevent, this is consistent with the area plan, the commercial zoning. This commercial zoning extending would avoid spot zoning, would avoid the land being used for purposes and then all the issues that arise therewith. By this zoning occurring, there is the benefit to the county, because there is no doubt but what these kinds of developments, such as I-40, have brought many tax dollars into the county. Those are important, and commercial development will come as the area is stabilized as to what the state's going to do. That has been a difficulty. Is it going to be 93 coming north with 11 going off, or 11 all the way through? Developers are going to insist on knowing with certainty what is going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question for Mr. Basinger?
I have a question. Mr. Basinger. Mr. Basinger, the reason this was turned down before was the fact that nothing has been done. Has any of the improvements or any of the promises that were made to planning and zoning been taken care of?
Supervisor Johnson, the fact is, yes, things have been done with regards to roads, with regards to paving certain areas, with regards to the area plan that had occurred. Yes, there were things that have been done and carried forth, but also you are well aware of when the first very volatile times came and then the 2008 times came, nothing really was happening. And there were businesses, contractors that I had direct contact with that went out of California that was developing all the big box stores over there and also doing work here. They absolutely had all the financing pulled. Everything came to a stop, and there were contracts that people had that were stopped because the financing was pulled on them. Those were signed contracts. With regards to this developer, they have been there, they have stayed there, they did do the Silverado estates, they have sold those lots, they have also sold other parcels. But as we know, along an interstate with two interchanges, it is logical sense. Supervisor Johnson, you have seen out in I-40 area, there hasn't been the development anticipated that was at one time. That's true in the city of Kingman. There were people that were going to come and they stopped because of what happened in the economy. That happened all over. We're now beginning to see an upturn. There is no detriment to the county to continue that which the county has looked at and unanimously approved an area plan. You have prior approved this zoning, yes, with conditions, but we're talking a great portion of those 10 years we're talking about where there were fast factors way beyond the control of these developers.
Right, but since this was last seen by us, has any of the requirements been met?
Supervisor Johnson, when this was last seen by you in November, that was after it was the extension was unanimously approved by the commission. And there was discussion at that time, but no, after that was, the extension was denied, no. The fact is that the conditional zoning is, as you know, and this came up in other areas of this county, people will be hesitant to come to begin to put things and go forward in a time that's just now turning around when the zoning isn't any longer there. And there are no conditions, if it's been withdrawn, there are no conditions to be met. But the conditions are there, you're having an extension for a period of time that if the Interstate 11 is solidified, that will help in terms of one facet. As I said again, the interchanges have been the land for those interchanges have been purchased. Section 5 and Section 21. So that's why we say it is probable the divided land, the divided highway has developed. There's nothing certain with the state of Arizona right now that has been locked in until it's locked in, but we anticipate that. We also know that the developers come in areas. Look at Havasu, the commercial development that came out of town where they can acquire a large parcel that makes economic sense, that has access to it. This land meets those requirements far more than it meets the requirements of having residences along it, where we hear from people they want the quiet lifestyle, the no noise, I like that. But we live next to a city where actually we still have that, but we don't live right in the area of the interstate.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Basinger. Is there anything from Ms. Ballard that you'd like to add? I believe that we did ask for certain things to happen. I went back and watched our November meeting, and we did ask that certain things happen before we heard it again.
Supervisor Angus, we're here to answer any questions the board may have.
Madam Chair, this was heard by Planning and Zoning? This came from Planning and Zoning. Has it been heard by Planning and Zoning?
Mr. Chairman, reconsiderations by the Board of Supervisors are not heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission unless they're referred back to the Commission by the Board. So at this point in time, since this item has not actually been decided, the Board has not decided to reconsider the action, it has not been heard by Planning and Zoning.
But previously it was heard by Planning and Zoning before it came to us?
The reconsideration or the actual item itself?
Actual item.
Yes, the actual item itself was heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission, I believe, in October.
In October, and that was a unanimous vote to go ahead with that, do you recall?
Mr. Johnson, I actually do not recall.
Do you recall if there was objections at the Planning and Zoning from the public?
I do not recall any.
Are any of the people that are here today, are they within the zone where it will require unanimous vote of the board? Do you know?
Mr. Johnson, members of the board, at the time that this was considered by the commission, none of the objections that we've had today would raise a requirement for the unanimous, or actually it would be with a 5-member board, a 4/5 vote of the board.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question for Ms. Ballard. Generally, when we do an extension, it's for another 4 years. Is that correct, Ms. Ballard?
Mr. Watson, members of the board, typically when the board does an extension of time for a rezone, those extensions of time are done for a 1-year period of time.
1-year period. So this would be a 1-year extension if I were to make a motion for that today?
Mr. Watson, members of the board, the applicant has actually requested a 3-year extension.
Right, I understand that.
Okay.
And I'm sorry for the earlier comment. I don't know where I was coming from on that, but let me explain. Do I need to make a motion first in order to explain?
Does he need to make a motion?
Okay. I brought this item back for reconsideration for a number of items on this. Number one is to make sure that we continue to make sure that there's a distinction between the two projects, the commercial project and the solar project. Now, the commercial project is consistent with the area plan. We've had discussions back and forth over the years as to whether commercial property ought to, once it's designated, should remain commercial property. Number three, the planning and zoning approved this prior to our questioning back in the earlier part. And the commercial project is not really recommended for residential uses. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that there's a distinction between the two projects. The homes that are dilapidated, that are falling apart, and that are at risk for fire, theft, and other things are down on the solar project. And a number of people have mixed that into this consideration today. So with all those considerations, at this time, I would like to make a recommendation that we approve the BOS Resolution 2013-15 for a 2-year extension.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second discussion,
I'll second.
Did you say for discussion?
yes.
Okay. Supervisor Johnson?
I guess my only question would be, if this does get approval, could it be shortened to a one-year period to show that they're actually doing something, since we don't have a very good record with them?
Tell you what, I'll make that concession. Modify my earlier motion to 1 year.
Okay.
Second.
Does our clerk of the board have all that? Okay, so I have a motion and a second for a one-year extension. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I didn't
Oh, okay. Do you want to take a verbal vote? Because I didn't hear everything.
Supervisor Watson?
Yes.
Supervisor Johnson?
Yes.
Supervisor Moss?
Yes.
Supervisor Brotherton?
Yes.
Chairman Angus?
Yes. Okay, now we'll move on to 30B, which is, I think, the other side of what we were talking about, discussion and possible action, adoption of the Board of Supervisor Resolution number 2013-1518, extension
Madam
of...
Chair.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Probably, Madam Chairman, I know earlier on you made a motion to reconsider, and it was seconded and approved. So basically, right now, you're going to be handling the extension of time. That's what you've been discussing so far. Just so you know that you've already authorized reconsideration under A. So now your motion would be under B.
Right.
Under B for the 1 year extension.
But that's what I thought, the motion you just made was for,
Was for,
was for B. You already moved and approved the reconsideration.
now I'm really lost. I
When we
apologize.
Madam Chair, when we reconsidered, then we go to B, because we already did it, so this motion would be done, we'd be done with it.
So
So
we're
you'd be
done.
finished with the item.
We're finished with the item?
Yes.
Okay. Wow, that was fast. Okay, I apologize for all of that. All right, number 31, discussion and possible action requiring all nonprofit special event liquor license recipients to report back to the Board of Supervisors at the first meeting after their event to show proof that they have received at the least the 25% of the gross revenues as provided by ARS 4-203.02. This was continued from our board meeting of January 21st and February 3rd. Motion?
I move that we discuss.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
The last I heard, Madam Chair, that I think the staff was going to bring us back a proposal. I think we saw a brief paragraph-long note attached to our materials that the nonprofit who's the recipient of the funds agreed to report back to the board if they received their 25% of the gross proceeds. Is that correct, Mr. Ekstrom?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Moss, yes, it is. That was my understanding, that Supervisor Johnson wanted something that would require them to come back before the board to let the board know if indeed the contract was complied with. As we said last time, they're required to have a contract before they can get a license.
So as I understand it now, the nonprofits would, when they apply for their liquor license in cooperation with a promoter, they would have to provide us a contract, which they've always been obligated to do, though we haven't very frequently observed that rule. And secondly, they'll have to provide us that signed statement saying we acknowledge or we understand, basically an informational statement from us, that we have to come back and tell you we actually received our 25%. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct, Madam Chair, Mr. Moss.
Now, there's one step past this, because the nonprofit is not the person we're targeting. They're just an information source for us. What do we do to the promoter if they don't give them the 25%? That's my next question here. Because I like number one and number two, which is the contract and their statement that we know we have to come back, so we let you know that we haven't been cheated. But what's the recourse we have against the promoter if they come back and say we haven't got our 25%, or they haven't given us an accounting, and they send us a $1,000 check and said this is all you're due, but they haven't shown us the books or whatever maybe? What do we do in follow-up to that?
Madam Chairman, Mr. Moss, it was
My understanding that what Supervisor Johnson had in mind is that when these people come back again on another contract to promote as a promoter, that we would deny the license on the basis that they didn't pay the last person.
Is that right, Supervisor Johnson?
Yes, Supervisor Moss, and notify the state the same thing, too, that we
Good.
would not be doing it.
So that system is acceptable?
Probably the best we're going to be able to get, I believe.
Okay, all right.
Okay?
With that said, I move that we approve requiring all nonprofit special event liquor license recipients to report back to the Board of Supervisors at the first meeting after their event to show proof that they have received at least 25% of the gross revenues, and I suppose that would be gross revenues when they're working in cooperation with a promoter as provided, or other third-party entity, as provided by ARS Section 4-203.02.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Number 32, discussion and possible action, adoption of Board of Supervisor Resolution Number 2014-019, calling upon the Arizona State Legislature to fulfill its constitutional duty to fully fund HERF as defined by the Arizona Constitution, Article 9, Section 14.
Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
I placed this on the agenda. I know we've taken a stand through CSA before, but I thought it might be a good idea to let something to have our legislatures in hand to know that Mohave County supports the total refunding, not just a partial of what we've had before, but these are tax dollars that are taken from our county, and they should be returned to our county. And that was my reason for putting this on, and the board
Okay.
wants to support it, great.
And there is a resolution, so do I have that in form of motion?
I'll make a motion
And I'll second.
for the adoption of that resolution to be sent to the legislature.
And I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 33, discussion and possible action, approve and direct staff to file an application to receive $500,000 grant funding through the Arizona Rural Economic Development Grant sponsored by the Arizona Commerce Authority for construction of a new production well serving the I-40 Industrial Corridor water system in the South Golden Valley area, and approve a $1.1 million county match sourced by Fund Number 85094953, I-40 Water System Connections Fund, contingent upon full $500,000 award of the grant.
Chair, I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 34, discussion and possible action, direct staff to work with the sheriff and the Office of Management and Budget to research and develop a plan to implement the process of enrolling pre-sentenced and sentenced inmates on the Affordable Care Act to recover medical costs and obtain mental health and substance abuse services for those individuals housed in Mohave County Jail.
Madam Chair, I move to discuss this item.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's discuss this.
I just wanted to state that, I want to make sure I clarify my understanding. This is just to research potential cost savings and come up with a plan to realize potential cost savings, not that we're actually putting enrollees onto Obamacare. Am I right about that?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Moss, I believe what I envisioned was we would refer this, obviously, to the sheriff and OMB, and I believe it's the sheriff's call with that we would support his action of doing this if it does save the county money. I believe we got an estimate from or not an estimate, but a report from the county manager this morning with the costs we've expended on mental health so far. Was that this year? Administrator Hendricks?
Yeah, that was, Madam Chairman, Supervisor Johnson, that's correct.
I think that
It's a tremendous amount that we're expending.
It was a couple $100,000, and especially with mental health, it would save the county a lot of money. Doesn't mean that the board supports the use of Obamacare, but if it's out there and it can save our taxpayers money, I think we're crazy if we don't use it.
I think you, Supervisor Johnson, you hit the nail on the head when it came to the conflict I'm currently experiencing. I don't want to put a single body into the system because I think people in Washington would just tout it as additional enrollees and America loves the system. On the other hand, if I can stick the federal government with the bill, I'm feeling pretty good about stuff. And so that's the conflict. And that's why I was asking if it was a plan so we can have a clear understanding of the cost savings. If it comes back to us and this is the plan and this is the cost savings and this is how we think it'll work. So when we can resolve that conflict between we can save X amount of dollars at the cost of actually having to put people into the Obamacare exchanges. So that's why I was asking for that clarification.
Right, and just for clarification, just for this year alone, 2014, the return to competency was $223,268, and the sexually violent offenders is $121,529.07. So there could be a tremendous amount of savings just with that, not counting the regular medical expenses that we get in.
Right.
Okay, Supervisor Brothers.
My question is, have we sent for any information from other counties who may have already started using this?
My research, I don't know if OMB found anybody in the state who has done. I guess Mr. Hepler could come up, but I know other states have used it and saved a tremendous amount of money with theirs.
That's what we need to know.
Good morning, Gene Hepler, Manager of Office Management and Budget, Madam Chairman, and Supervisors. Chief Deputy McCabe found an article that was written on February 6, 2014 on Boomerang that said at least 6 states and counties from Maryland to Oregon are getting inmates coverage under Obamacare and expansion of Medicare for the poor. The fledgling movement would shift the federal government some of the more than $6.5 billion on annual state costs for treating prisoners. Proponents said it would also make recidivism rare because inmates released with coverage are more likely to get treatment. So basically what they're looking for is mental illness, substance abuse, and other conditions. So there's, even California right now is looking, Oregon's going after this. One of the big areas is Cook County in the Illinois-Chicago area, and looking at moving forward to put this on. And I'll make sure you all get this article.
I have a question. What is the procedure right now when someone becomes incarcerated and they become ill? We automatically pay for that? Do we find out if they are insured? Do we go after, is there any mechanism for that?
Well, one of the things that we look at is when they're incarcerated and they're charged, and I can probably have the director of the detention facility come up and share his thoughts on it, but my understanding right now is we have to pay for that. We have a contract with a contractor that provides medical care. We're able to charge $10 for each person that has any care if they have money. And if they go to the outside care and they're in the hospital or are released, after 24 hours they're able to be picked up. So when they're covered under access, they lose their coverage right now. And that's what we're hoping to be able to move into this system to see if we can get coverage for Medicare. I know we have a coverage with our contractor for a certain amount, and then anything over, we get a bill for. And I think our recent bill is like $285,000 for outside services. One of the things that we have with the IGAs with the cities is if an inmate is brought in to our jail and they require outside services, we do contact the cities and let them know that inmate's and pass those charges over. We had I think about 1.5 years ago, an inmate that was put in jail and was receiving cancer treatment in Vegas, and it was costing us $65,000 per treatment for that one inmate, and we were paying the bill.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, motion?
I move that we direct staff to work with the Sheriff and the Office of Management and Budget to research and develop a plan to implement the process of enrolling pre-sentenced and sentenced inmates on the Affordable Care Act to recover medical costs and to obtain mental health and substance abuse services for those individuals housed in the Mohave County Jail.
I second the motion.
Okay, All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Our last item, number 35, discussion and possible action. Refer to Mohave County Sheriff for investigation of Constable Travis Heaton for failure to allow Arizona Revised Statute 11-445 to include filing of reports on a monthly basis to the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This has been an ongoing problem with this constable and filing his reports, and as everybody has the statute there, they are required to be filed. Attorney Ekstrom sent a letter, I believe everybody has a copy of it, in December 2nd of 2010, trying to get the constable to come in compliance with the law. Since then, they've continued to ignore us. To give you an idea, since 2005, in a 9-year period, we have expended $123,823.68 on this constable's office. We've received, I believe, $3,697.80. Without reports, we have no idea if money's being collected and not turned in. Nothing that's going on. The reason I think it should be returned over to the sheriff, because I believe there could, for our protection and also for the constable's protection, if there's just I guess just to find out if any money has been collected, where the money has gone to. That's why I make the recommendation, the motion, that we refer this to the sheriff's office for investigation, and for them to take the appropriate action, whether it be criminal or to turn it over to the constable ethics.
Okay. I did make a phone call yesterday to the past president of the Constables Association, and he informed me that it would not be the sheriff's job to investigate. An elected official does not investigate another elected official. There is such a thing as the Constable's Ethics Board of Ethics. What they do, there are two options here. What they do is they do their investigation and then refer to the presiding judge of the county. The presiding judge is the person that cases like this should go to. He can issue an order to show cause as to why the constable has not performed his duties according to law, and the presiding judge can either suspend his pay, order him to go to more training, or find him in contempt of court, and even so far, if there are fees not being handed over, send him to jail. So this would fall under the presiding judge. Am I correct on that? That's correct.
Well, I have a question, Madam Chair. If this falls under the presiding judge, then these reports are supposed to be going to the presiding judge the same as us. So obviously the presiding judge has not been doing his job for all this time either. So I'd ask the deputy county attorney, when we've investigated other elected officials. The sheriff has the right, if there could be a possible criminal element of this, to investigate anybody. It's just because one of us is elected doesn't mean that we're immune from prosecution. I mean, if this is county funds that we're looking at, so I cannot see why the sheriff does not have jurisdiction to look at county funds.
Madam Chairman, Supervisor Johnson, the sheriff does have jurisdiction to investigate crimes committed in the county, regardless of who commits them. The county attorney has the authority to remove individuals from office for malfeasance. So I think in working with Superior Court, we could figure out exactly where we need to go with it. I'd like to have it referred to Judge Gertler initially. And of course, if you want to send copies to my office and the sheriff's office of your request, we all look into it together.
Well, I don't know where this investigative arm of the court has come from. The sheriff is elected to investigate crimes in our county. I would think we would give it to the sheriff, who is the law enforcement official, to investigate, and he could refer it to whoever it would go to. I guess it seems like the court's trying to do something that they're not qualified to do.
Madam Chair, Supervisor Johnson, the one piece of leverage the court does have is withholding pay. That's why I always think that that's a good remedy if we can prevent it from being paid for a job he may or may not be doing. Otherwise, the sheriff has independent authority to investigate crimes, and you can refer it to whoever you like.
Right. But I mean, he's an elected official, and whether we stop his pay or don't stop his pay, I mean, obviously this board can't do that. The court can do that. I'm just more looking at the fact that monies may or may not have been collected, and may or not have been filed, and I was looking at the criminal aspect. I think that's more what the population cares about than
There would be a civil aspect handled by the court, a criminal aspect handled by the
handled by
sheriff's
the sheriff.
department.
That was my reason for saying we'd go to the sheriff, just to, so everybody knows it was investigated, and we found there was nothing there, or there was something there, and we did something that way. And then the court can do whatever they want as far as its pay or, that was why I made the motion I made. If
No,
everybody
I understand that. What I had been told was that the sheriff couldn't. So again, I'm going to defer to you.
Okay.
And if you say that that's the case, and that's the way this board chooses to go. Like I said, the other option is to hand it to the Ethics Board, which I believe our sheriff is on the board, the Constable's Board of Ethics, and have them do the investigation, then hand it over, and we'd have all the information. That's our options.
Madam Chair, my eyesight is absolutely horrible, but is that one of our constables back in the audience speak? I'm nodding her head.
Yes.
Does she have anything she'd like to fill us in? Because she seems like the most expert person in the room when it comes to constables' responsibilities.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Supervisors. I'm here just to answer questions. If you have any of me, I am familiar with the Constable Ethics Board, and there is statute that provides the authority that board has. And yes, your sheriff is a member of that board. It's a 9-member board consisting of an elected sheriff, a county administrator. I think there's 2 constables from large counties, 2 constables from small counties. There's a member at large appointed by the governor, also a justice of the peace. So there's a large variety of people that sit on this board. There's no one currently sitting on the board from Mohave County. So if you choose to make a complaint, which I did bring a complaint form for you, it would be sent to the board. The board would notify the constable, who would then have 20 days to respond to the accusations, and then it would be assigned to an investigative committee of the ethics board, and then those results would be brought back to the county attorney or to the presiding judge for further follow-up and charges of malfeasance or criminal charges, civil, whatever the investigation leads to. So that's all I have to add, and I can leave this with you.
You just said that there's no one from Mohave County on board, but didn't we just say that our sheriff is on this ethics board?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Other than the sheriff, there are no county constables on the board is what I meant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you, Jean.
You're welcome.
I think I had a motion. I don't know if I ever got a second, right?
Can you restate the motion, please?
Sure, you can read it back to me? I would make a motion to refer this to the county sheriff for investigation and/or prosecution, or referral to the Constable Ethics Board.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Is there anything else? Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Where's Lynn Dixie?